welcome to Fintech Focus TV. I'm Toby Babb and delighted to be joined once again by Matthew Cheung from ipushpull. Matthew, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Listen, thanks so much for sparing the time. I know how busy it is for everyone at the moment. We've been doing these series of COVID-19 specials, really looking at how fintech businesses are surviving, thriving, moving through this process. It's really good to speak to you. I think, from my perspective, there's been some really fascinating stuff that we're going to get onto about your history that sort of makes you really, really interesting right now. But for anyone who hasn't heard of ipushpull and yourself so far, give us a quick background about what you do and where you can add value.
Yeah, sure. We solve the problem of manual processes around emails, file sharing, all these kind of manual processes where people are taking data from one place to another. And as soon as you do that manually, you lose the ability to connect that all together in real time. It's hard to automate, it's hard to streamline. Now you see a lot of this across the financial markets, both from front office with sales and traders in kind of, pre-negotiation workflows through to, booking, allocating things afterwards, and all the way downstream through to back office where, there's millions of internal emails with spreadsheet attachments that are sent every day. And the element where people have to move data from one place to another, again, is very cumbersome. It's slow. Failed trades take days to get fixed and so on. So we're effectively looking to streamline what's really a universal problem across kind of capital markets, but actually outside of that as well. But initially focusing in on capital markets. So that's what we do from a very high level. Kind of functionality wise, we have integrations into 20 or so different platforms. We allow data to be connected in real time. Think of kind of Google Sheets type functionality, but that can work inside anything. So we've got customers ranging from kind of data producers who could be a bank producing data that they're sending out to clients, such as real-time options prices or axes in fixed income markets, through to reference data companies that might have a massive database of data they want to kind of optimize and make more efficient how they're sharing that with their clients. Through to more the workflow element where you think about on the kind of trading element, there's so many markets that are not electronically traded. They're still done on voice. People picking up phone, people on the chat, all manual. All of that needs to be double keyed somewhere else a lot of the time. So we're solving all of those problems as well. So it's a big mountain to climb, but we're making small chips at it at the moment, and it's a very exciting time.
Well, it's very modest on the small chips because everything I've ever read about you guys has been about award-winning growth and innovation and everything like that. And it's really fascinating seeing innovative companies. And I think just specifically looking at what we're going through at the moment, your background's really interesting because this is your second business, right? And the first one you took through sort of midway through that sort of business, you took through the global financial crisis. Now 5 years into to this business, you're facing another great economic issue which is affecting everyone within that. You talked about opportunity through the through the financial crisis and how that helped your last business, and again you're adding real value and I'm a big believer in turning negatives into positives. I think that's something which you agree with. Again, tell us a little bit about the opportunities and how you as a business that's sort of 5 years old now are going to utilize this to turn it into a positive.
I think there's probably a few elements to that. I mean, one is, so as a group of founders in our company, there's 3 of us, and myself and one of the other founders also had a company, and he actually his between the 3 of us as founders, so his first day working on the floor at Life was on the 87 crash. And then he nearly IPO'd his first company, but then the 2000 bubble crash happened. So and then we've and I actually know the one of the other co-founders because he was a customer of mine in our previous business, and he was listening to me covering the markets during the global financial crisis. So between kind of the 2 of us in that sense, and the 3 of us with the other co-founder, we've got experience, I think, on the ground, both in terms of actively participating in the markets on trading side, and also delivering services to customers. Because both of us who've had previous companies, we've both traded before and also provided services to traders and people in markets. Now, that experience, I think, has been incredibly useful in this time now, because I think firstly I spent quite a bit of time in China last year, actually, because we've one of the awards that you kind of mentioned we won was through CFETS, which is the largest FX and rates trading venue in China, and we were the only non-Chinese company to actually be part of the competition. There's about like 2,000 people. So that was fascinating, going over and spending time seeing actually what the fintech world is like over there. It's because it's a bit of it's relatively isolated compared to kind of outside in the West, but there's a lot of stuff going on out there at a frantic pace. But the on the kind of the back of that though, because we're talking to people in China all the time, we kind of got a feel for what they were seeing themselves kind of in the first person from China. So we were kind of aware of it from quite early on. And I've been watching the markets anyway, because that's what I used to do in my kind of previous company. So I think by probably middle, end of February, we were starting to plan for the worst at that point. So when things, I think the market started tanking initially beginning of March, the first go. Then you had kind of the trade war with, Russia and Saudi, and then it puked again, afterwards. But because we started our planning early, we'd already started to look at costs, looking at sales pipeline, looking at what we could, push over, over the finish line with existing deals that we had. So we're kind of all hands on deck on that. So it was tightening things up in terms of sales and costs. For example, we're in a WeWork office, which one of the beauties of that is actually you're on a short-term notice. So we can scale up. Because we took that on so we could scale up quickly. But in this scenario, we can also scale down quickly, because that's the beauty of being a startup and being agile and quick to react to things. That that's something we can optimize that cost and reduce it. And I think some of that, looking at the cash flow and thinking, prudently far ahead and so on, that's experience we've built from, having a company before. That's kind of one part to that answer. The other part is actually around the opportunity now for, there's been a massive shift in people obviously being forced to work at home. And on the back of that, there's lots of things which has been impacted, anything from people with broadband issues, because your kids and your family are at home, who are also downloading films and so on. My 4-year-old running in and bowing into my meetings, and but that's happened. There's probably at least once or twice a week I've been with people who are working at a big bank or a big firm, have similar things happen. So people are used to it now. So you can have anything from that.
It's actually just happening in the corner.
but then you've got through to, there's hardware shortages. You can't buy webcams or extra screens because there's too much demand and there's no supply because stuff's not getting shipped. Through all the way to, in our world, where you've got on the front office side, where you've got traders who are now working at home. They previously in the desk would have some big setup with 8 screens all around them, their colleagues all around them. They'll overhear stuff. They'll learn stuff through osmosis through the day because they can hear the hubbub of what's going on. I can hear the credit desk down the end. They're shouting about something that must be kicking off in the market. Let's walk down and have a look. You lose that. It's gone. So people need to recreate that, but you're also restricted. People working at home, they may have limited screen real estate. So your ways of working has to change. So that for us has been a really big opportunity, because we provide data sharing, data aggregation, and workflow. So all of that linked together, where previously you may have had multiple different applications open on your screen, chats with 10, 20 different people. Now you're limited in what you can have visible on the screen. So if you can aggregate that somehow, if you can create your own kind of user-defined notifications around that, then that enhances your workflow. So we've seen things like that in the front office. Then in the back office, there's also been obviously a lot of the big banks have outsourced back office operations to India, Indonesia, Philippines, countries like that. India had a massive lockdown, much more aggressive than any other country, just because of the fact that the population density and cities and how they're built and so on. Now the ability then for all of those people to work at home at the same level and volume of output of what they're doing obviously has decreased significantly. So then you see things like failed trades and things which take a longer amount of time to get fixed. That's impacted there. So all the way along, at least in capital markets, the trade life cycle has been impacted in different ways. Traders we've seen have done. You've seen obviously the markets have been moving around a lot, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's lots more kind of deals going on and volumes going through in certain areas, because there's less liquidity, because less people are kind of putting trades on in certain markets, and other markets have been more busy. Obviously markets have been incredibly busy because you've got, and also looking at things like the share price of like IG Index and Hargreaves Lansdown in the UK. Their share price has gone like that, in the last couple of months, because everyone's sitting at home like day trading. But it's you've always got to look for these previously to have a big change like what's happened now, where there's been millions and millions of people working at home, whereas previously would have been unthinkable 3-4 months ago. Now people are forced to do it. Normally you need some big cultural change to make something happen, some catalyst. This case has actually been a virus which has been the catalyst for change. But it's forced people onto the cloud. It's forced people into embracing the latest collaboration technology, like we're talking on Zoom. Zoom's gone from 10 million to 300 million users in like 3-4 months. You've got Microsoft Teams that went from I think 10 million in December to like 50 million. Actually, Microsoft I think is going to report this evening or tomorrow. So keep your eye on what their usage is for Teams, because I could see that rocketing through the roof.
Absolutely.
And again, look at the share price of Microsoft. Their share price, I think, their market value of Microsoft is about a third of the entire FTSE 100. So it's like just goes to show technology is there's the better, faster, cheaper technology that can improve and streamline things, and then there's just completely new ways of doing things. People are forced to embrace all of that now. So we're a technology company, so it's it's obviously it's an awful time, and there's a lot of disruption going on for people health wise, but from a business opportunity and technology cultural change, it's been the catalyst probably that everyone wanted.
I think that's a really important part to mention, because look, there is a huge humanitarian aspect to this, and absolutely tragic in everything that's going. But I think the sort of responsibility now comes on to recognise how we can improve as a society, as a world from this. And I think that sort of rate of change is going to be fascinating. How technology has been adopted and how critical it's proven itself to be, over the last couple of months has been so important. And if it wasn't, at the kernel of every sort of financial institution's board at that sort of stage, the CTO, CIO, is certainly just raising in stock all the time through it. Let's talk a little bit about the crystal ball and what this means, because there is a rapid rate of necessity change at the moment. What do you think the lasting impact of this will be?
So I guess I'll start off in terms of crystal balls. I mean, probably the best crystal ball I can look at is probably just for us, as a company. So for us as a company, it didn't affect us that much, if at all, in terms of our day-to-day working. Because we had an office in WeWork, and we would and WeWork's been great for when you're traveling. I'm sure you've done it when you're kind of traveling around the world. You can use offices all around the world. That's been great. But obviously you can't do any of that now. But in one way where we can scale it down, where you obviously scale down your physical presence, you can ramp up your online presence. So in terms of remote working, we were kind of remote working 50% of the time anyway. So doing 100% of the time doesn't make that much difference. I think on a kind of a personal level, there's obviously some of the interpersonal changes that comes with remote working. Some people have, I've got an office set up at home, but some people in the team don't. That's more difficult for them because they're on a kitchen table and people running around the background and so on. So I think that has been difficult for quite a lot of people, to be perfectly honest. So there are, as much as remote working is great, there are some downsides to it on that. It needs to be kind of managed in the right way. There needs to be, there's kind of obviously everyone's got their own kind of in their mind exit plan of when there can be some more returning back to normal with having offices and so on. In terms of how we're dealing with customers, it's actually been a positive for us. So where we were talking to banks previously and things, you would have a meeting once a week or once a month, and then things just go at a snail's pace. Because of the facts, particularly in the first couple of weeks when people were adjusting to working at home and banks were moving all their staff off site or home working, we actually found in the first the first couple of weeks of March, probably first 3 weeks of March, we got more done in those 3 weeks than we've been getting done in the last kind of 9-12 months, because you were talking to people that are working in these big institutions that suddenly have a lot of time. So previously they were working on multiple projects, they've been dragged from meeting to meeting, and you get them on the phone and they're half listening because they're trying to do something else at their desk. Whereas now you get their full 100%, undivided attention. And now, because of what we're doing, we're kind of accelerating these digital initiatives, and we've kind of been bumped up in priority compared to some things which actually can't be done now because you need to be in the office for whatever reason, have been downgraded. So in that sense, from a sales perspective, we've been busier than we ever have, I think, in the last 2 months. So I think that's a byproduct of we were fortunate enough to be in the right place at the right time. And we're kind of geared up to this way of working anyway. So there was no transition. It was just like we were working this way anyway. So we've got accounts for Zoom and Uber and WebEx and every single video conferencing thing that we have, because some work for some people and some don't. But we had all of that anyway, and we know how to kind of work in that world. So I think we're looking for how we've kind of probably changed our business slightly. Is we've kind of, like anyone, we've been ultra prudent on our outlook. So therefore, we've kind of reduced costs where we can. On the sales perspective, we've already seen some of the bigger kind of mega deals we were working on have slowed down. But that hasn't happened in that kind of tier 2, tier 3, SME, smaller company type level. Some of those companies are still very active, and you can talk to the decision maker. Whereas when you're talking to some massive, enterprise company, some of the deals they were working on needed kind of, board approval, and we're not high on the list at a board meeting. So, so those type of things have just slowed down. So you kind of refocus, I think, where there's opportunity and where you can do things quickly. And then similarly, we've diversified a little bit. So we're launching, we've got a notifications kind of module on our platform. We're actually launching that as a kind of separate service, and having it as an easier to onboard, lightweight service, which we can sell easily for people that want to be able to create notifications on any application and then send a notification into anything else. So you might have a spreadsheet, you want to send a notification when something changing is in that to a WhatsApp message, for example, or if this piece of data updates in this BI platform or database, send a notification into a Symphony chat or as a text message where someone might not have some internet signal. So we're building like a notification service for that, which we're focusing on that kind of tier 2, tier 3 SME level. But actually it's industry agnostic. So for us, it's a slight diversification play where if things in, kind of this enterprise world that we normally sell into, if that completely grinds to a halt, we've got a few other seeds that are planted down elsewhere. So it's very much plan for the worst, hope for the best, but having some structure around that and plans around it as well.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting stuff that you've been talking about all the way through this. The experience that we sort of spoke about beforehand about having navigated through these choppy waters with your key team has led to some really prudent thinking. The easy stuff is is cost cutting and planning. in that sort of thing. But the ability to diversify, the ability to look at that and maximise, where your efforts are pointed is critical to that sort of thriving and setting yourself up to to go through moving forward. And you say, look, a bit of luck about the right time and the right position and being in the right area. But that to happen twice sort of starts to look a little bit less like luck and good market position, doesn't it? So look, staying on the crystal ball theme and just looking at the industry, what do you think will happen to the what's your predictions about how we turn up? Are we looking V shape? Are we looking U shape, L shape? When do you think this sort of moves back into play? And you had the vision of foresight, the fortune foresight with what was happening in China beforehand. Let's see what happens after this. What's your predictions there on the wider scale of the exit and how long this takes to return to some sort of normality?
Yeah, I think in the UK at least, the big thing and I'm probably talking from my own experience and friends of mine who are kind of my age who have got kids, I think the schools opening is obviously going to be a big thing. When that's going to be, that is, for example, my wife, she got put on furlough because she was actually working for the first couple of kind of month or so, but then like I've got an office, but she was working downstairs in the kitchen with my 4-year-old running around, and in the end it was she couldn't really work properly. And then kind of the furlough discussion was there, and it kind of made sense for her to kind of take that option, which I think in the long run is probably better for my daughter, because she's going to have kind of undivided attention, whereas we found it difficult when you've only got one child as well. I know plenty of people have got 3 or 4 or more. So I think that's that.
3 sets of homeschooling going on through there at the moment.
No, it's not easy, and no, I don't know anyone. There's one person I know who actually studied child psychology and trained as a Montessori teacher, and they're actually finding homeschooling quite easy. But for the other 99.99%, everyone is struggling a little bit. It's not easy.
In the office.
So I think that's a key thing, because until that happens, there's still 50% of if there was a family unit, there's half of them, if they were working, they're not working now. Only one person can work. I think that's important. I mean, we as a company, we're kind of looking at maybe people having this kind of phased returning back to work, and maybe that's starting in July, August, with a view to September. Kids going back to school. That would be our optimistic scenario. But we're also planning for some of the bigger institutions we're talking to. They're talking about actually not having people returning back to the office properly until the end of the year. So it entirely depends. I mean, the crystal ball is pretty useless because it's a fast market. Things are changing all the time. There's not a decent amount of testing in this country yet. In terms of a vaccine, I think you're just going to get lucky if you get anything this year. There's all these. It's so difficult to say, but for us, because we're embracing technology, and I think the biggest thing for technology is people are using the cloud now. Whereas people before it's like, we've got our own data centers and we've got all this stuff that we don't want to move. It's like, well, the CIA uses AWS, so why can't you use it? And you've got, even in the last week, you've had BlackRock, NASDAQ, Charles River, they've all kind of come out saying, we're using AWS, we're using Azure, we're using all these cloud providers. So on that basis, so for us, when we started our company 5 years ago, when we started selling into banks, we were doing on-prem installations. So we would have to go in with a USB stick with everything on it, and you had to have someone with you. You have to upload it into some, in some bare metal. Bare metal's like an actual physical bit of kit. We'd have to upload our service onto that. You'd have someone sitting beside you watching what you're typing. It's ultra secure, and quite rightly as well. But that's not a scalable way to do it. It can be a scalable. You can throw people at it, but it's not the new way of doing things. It's an old way of doing things. And I think now that people can see that the cloud is used, and talking about Microsoft share price we mentioned earlier, that's going like that, because of the cloud. Their cloud revenues are growing 100% year on year, and the headroom of that market is ginormous. The cloud market at the moment is only taken a very small fraction of what potentially could be. So I think as people move towards using the cloud, so then for us, talking about our situation and back to the crystal ball, if people are using the cloud, we can do it all remotely. So for us as a company, it's good if people start going in that direction. Face-to-face meetings, you obviously, you're in recruitment. Face-to-face is kind of a necessity, but people obviously have to adapt. But and similar for us, you can get the tone in the room. You kind of get, you might have you just get on with someone, or you have your little chit chat when they pick you up in the lift, and all of that builds a rapport and is part of a process which actually feeds into a sales kind of cycle and a sales pitch. You do lose some of that, but I think because people are more time pressured now, there's a move towards more efficiency. I think it's a bit easier now to be a little bit more upfront with things, because you're actually not face to face as well, when you're talking to people. So there's a new paradigm definitely out of this, and hopefully for the better in regards to remote working and also things like I think people on maternity leave and paternity leave. Maternity leave, obviously conditions for that have always been your maternity pay is a month or 6 weeks or whatever. Some companies are saying, we do a little bit more, but it's pretty shoddy what we do in this country compared to like Scandinavians and so on, and it's worse in other countries as well. So you have things like that, and that's for the kind of the mothers taking time off, but then for the fathers, you can take 2 weeks off or 3 weeks off, and then it's frowned upon if it's more than that. That's such an old school way of doing it. If you know now that people can work responsibly at home and still do all the same stuff they were doing, then why not? I think there's so many different areas it can be a really positive catalyst for, and I think there needs to be some momentum that continues after this. Things shouldn't return to normal. I had, I'm probably rambling a bit now. I had a doctor's appointment. I think it was one of the weeks when there was only a handful of coronavirus cases in the UK. And then the doctors called me up a few days before and said, your appointment is now going to be on the phone. I was like, okay, fine. So the doctor called me, spoke to me and said, right, well, the process is now is we do a phone conversation, and then if there's a need for it, we'll do a follow-up video conference. And then after that, if you need to, we'll bring you into the GP or send you to hospital, or you go to a nurse. And so the NHS has been totally it's been a massive force for change for the NHS. So they've brought in technology. Like I've got some people that I know who run kind of medical technology companies, doing some video conferencing technologies for health services, doing things like remote blood testing and things like that. So you don't need to have a nurse beside you. You can go to a pharmacy, they take your blood, and then someone remotely can analyze it and give you, real-time results. Things like that. There's been so much interest and traction in those areas now. So again, it's a force for change for the better. Where why were you going into a doctor's surgery before, full of young and old people who are ill, who you could contract something from, and then you're at risk yourself of actually you giving stuff to someone else or you contracting it. So why don't you do that by video or some other means of doing it? So there's lots of areas where things are going to change. I think on the other side is obviously all the kind of state workers, people working in health services, the emergency services, the bus drivers. I mean, that's terrible what's happened to the bus drivers in the UK. Things like that all needs to change. So, and again, there's reasons for technology for, do you really need bus drivers as well? If people are actually dying doing that and they're not getting paid well, you can have, there are fully automated buses in China. They've created, I've seen there's certain cities that have a fully automated bus service in certain cities. There's some in Silicon Valley where they're kind of testing it. And then why don't you use the people to be a nice friendly face to welcome people on board and things like that instead? Change,
Yeah.
automation and artificial intelligence and all the fourth industrial revolution, or whatever name you want to call it, is a force for good. It's not a Terminator scenario; it's an Iron Man scenario. They're all things which are enabling humans to do a better way or job of doing stuff. So I think there's some positives. I think that are definitely coming out of it already, but I think there needs to be that momentum there afterwards.
I agree with that completely. Look, I think there's a huge responsibility to make sure that everything we learn from this and does, as we said at the offset of the show, is, to turn a negative into a positive. And if we can take some of those lessons, and technology can continue, I've been in recruitment in the tech industry for 20 years and seen the adoption of cloud sort of gradually be grudgingly taken on, progressively throughout that time. This has just shown how beneficial it can be. And of course, there's going to be bits and pieces that continue to need evolution and improvement and such like. But just something like this, allowing people to perform better and to do their jobs better and to have more flexibility and all these different things that are sort of coming together. We've had real-time experience of the maternity aspect that you're talking about before, and how that can be improved moving forward. I think the thing that I've been delighted about is how companies have been so adaptive to be able to take people on and to continue hiring processes through this and to onboard virtually and all those sort of things has been phenomenal. So again, 10 years ago in my career, this wouldn't have been able to happen, and it had been shut up shop for a while. So you got through it. Right now, you can still do decent training. People are. I get what you mean about the sort of face-to-face aspect of hiring, but there's this sort of ability to use video technology now has just enhanced everyone's experience so much. So there's so many positives that come out of it, and I'm pleased to hear that again you put yourself in a good position and are managing to find the positives through it. I'm really excited to hear more and more about what you guys do and how you continue to adapt. I love so many different things I think we can take out of this conversation about how people can adapt and diversify and plan for this, and hopefully there's going to be people out there who are watching this and interested in chatting to you a little bit further and finding out a little bit more about the business, but B, also taking stuff which I think is so useful into how they can look at this situation again and take some of the lessons from what you've done throughout your career so far. So listen, I really am grateful for you sharing your time. I'm sure there's going to be people out there who want to get in touch with you. What's the best way of reaching you?
You can, feel free to email me directly. So it's my name, so matthew.cheung@ipushpull.com.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Matthew, it's been wonderful talking to you. Thanks so much for sharing all your insight. And to everyone watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you soon on another episode of Fintech Focus TV. Thanks for watching.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Toby.